So, we're on episode 3 of our Around the World in-depth, where we're going to break down each different country, each part of the journey, and just go into a bit more detail of stuff that you can't see every day on Instagram or on the Reels. So, a little bit of a backlog of where we've been. You've just put in a pretty big shift to get through the majority of Europe, essentially. Not quite. You've gone the whole way down into Switzerland now, and we've met in a place called Lake Lugano. Okay, so I've flown out. We are currently not in Italy, we're currently in Turkey, but we're going to backlog and build up to Turkey from here. So, just quickly, what do you remember of that first day, getting down to Lake Lugano and going off from there?
First day was pretty heavy, for me to meet you anyway. By the time I got to meet you, it was sort of early evening on the shores of Lake Lugano. I remember it had been a really long day of riding, lots of climbing, and on the way out of at the end of Switzerland that day, I'd managed to grab some food, some water, and then I got down to meet you on the side of the lake.
And a cucumber. He's turned up with a cucumber in the back of his jersey on the first day, and I'm like, what? Why have you got that?
I think the thing that really blew my mind with Switzerland was, apart from the cost of everything and how beautiful the mountains were, was that the petrol stations had the most incredible selection of food, fresh fruit and veg. And I had cucumbers in fridges. So
hydration, nutrition, perfect.
It was hot riding, it was the perfect food. So yeah, rolled down to meet you, pretty tired, so we grabbed some food, got some accommodation for that night so we could just get everything sorted, get a good night's sleep, and we hit the road the next morning.
Yeah, nice. So we headed that night near Lake Como.
Yeah.
So what are your first thoughts? Had you been to Lake Como before?
No. It was my first time.
Amazing.
It was useful to have a guide.
Yeah, I'd been before. A few times before. So I knew a few of my favourite spots which I was absolutely buzzing to go back to, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But what were your first impressions going into Como? And starting the Italy leg, which we were pretty buzzing for. It was a big part of the trip.
Italy was a part of the trip that I was excited for. It seemed almost a waste that it was so early in the trip. It was one of the countries I was most excited to ride through. The section to get down to Como, we'd climbed a lot at the end of the day before. So the start of that day had plenty of descending. We went past lots of cycling clubs out, lots of really old Italian men on their old Italian bikes as we dropped down into town. And Como was beautiful. Loads of amazing buildings, buzzing with life. It had a really good feeling to it.
Yeah.
That said, I don't know about you after your day of travelling, but I was knackered. We had a bit of a late start anyway, so first stop was for coffee.
Yeah.
And the coffee in France was appalling. I quite like a nice coffee, and I had one nice coffee in France, and that was when it was made by an English couple. It had been such a frustrating week of cafe stops. So to get through France and Switzerland into Italy, the first cafe stop we had, it was just incredible.
That's insane.
It was a beautiful little cafe in a square in Como.
Yeah.
We had some pastries, we had a coffee, and it was a struggle to leave. It was a great way to start.
Right next to the cathedral. So I'd been a few times before, and I knew of that cafe, it did amazing hot chocolates, and I was like, yes, I want one of those. And there was this incredible flatbread shop that I remember.
Yes.
And I said to you, before we even got there, I was like, we have to go to this shop.
I think you told me that while I was still riding across France.
Yes,
when I get to meet
probably.
You,
I'd planned it all the way.
Yeah, this was a long time coming. I think it was the only reason you came out.
It was incredible. It was like this soft cheese with it was like prosciutto ham and this like chili jam type stuff.
Rocket as
and
well.
rocket.
It's amazing.
And we brought 2 each or 3 each.
I had one each to
got them to cut them in half, and we literally had them for the rest of the day. Which was brilliant. It was brilliant because it was it wasn't a tough day, but it was the first day riding together, which we'll get into in a sec, and it just felt like something new. I think in a way, for me anyway.
Yeah, it was the start of the next chapter of riding.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed going full send for a week and pushing it to get down there. First big week on a heavy bike, but it was nice to be able to get down, have some company, and we've done it even more now through Turkey. But we've managed to find just the right balance of getting some cycling done, but also spending a lot of time messing around. And it's the way that we both like to ride bikes, which is why it works.
If you look at Duncan Strava, on the bits that I've gone out, they're significantly lower distances compared to normal.
It's important to note though, it's not because you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's just because we spend a lot of time not
100%.
cycling because we're either
messing about, waking up too late.
Yeah, or filming stuff,
Yeah.
which is the creative element was the other part I was excited for this side. To have you out with your camera was
we've got some pretty cool shots.
It was a perk,
even from Italy, which is great. Cool. So we went through Como. We got out on some lovely gravel, some great little climbs, and then our goal was to get to Garda. What was your memory of that evening, though?
That ride was it's a stunning place to ride a bike. It's somewhere that I'd probably recommend as an introduction to bike packing as well. Quite easy to fly in and out of.
Very
pretty
easy.
Good train networks, so you've always got backup. But we were hoping to wild camp, which was the plan for a lot of the around the world trip because it's free, and it's a great way to just actually get some rest in where you won't be interrupted by anyone. But that day at the part of the day where we wanted to stop to camp, we found ourselves in a sort of natural park area, national park, where anywhere you could go was either built up with villages and towns, which obviously you can't wild camp in, or as you progressed out and back into the countryside, anywhere that would be the perfect place to wild camp had big signs up saying no camping, no fires, no bikes in lots of places.
They were very aware that this is what people would like to do, and then realised, we're going to stop.
We'll stop it. So we couldn't do that. So it got later and later. We found a few campsites, and these campsites just looked at us and didn't want to let us in.
They shut us down.
They shut us down fast.
They were like, no, bye.
For no particular reason.
No. It was quite late. That was the thing. It was maybe 11 o'clock at this point, maybe even later.
Yeah, it was late evening. But it was what it was. We couldn't find anywhere to wild camp, and we couldn't get a campsite to let us in. So fortunately, there was one cheap place on booking.com quite close by. So we booked it. We didn't look it up. We hit book. We told them we'd be there in 45 minutes, and they said, "Fantastic, we'll see you then." So we rode on up the side of Lake Iseo, I think it's called. Beautiful to see in the dark with all of the villages along the side lit up. But we then climbed up away from the lake to get to this place. It was fantastic place. It was built into an archway, sort of almost underground like a basement. There weren't any windows. Maybe there was one small window, big heavy wooden doors.
It's a bit like a dungeon, in a way. A nice dungeon.
Yeah, and I'm not particularly big on interior design. Joel's organised these chairs, but it certainly had a vibe. The best thing about it was I was outside trying to just talk through what we were doing and who we were and where we were going with the owner of this place. Well, Joel started taking his bags inside, and he walked through the door, and I could hear from outside in this courtyard in the middle of the night him cackling with laughter as he entered this room, which I had to try and keep a straight face while I was doing my best with Google Translate, and said goodbye to the owner and got my bags and went inside, where I found a lovely room, beautiful room, big, a couple of beds.
It was wicked.
It was a really cool place, big space as well, loads of place to dry our kit out. But the shower was in a glass. Was just in a glass box.
There's a glass cubicle in the bedroom with some romantic ivory coming down the side. So if you wanted to shower, that was your place. And then the toilet was in the corridor to the room, but it had like a temporary screen around it, like something you would get changed behind if you were in like a theatre production.
It was like a camping windbreak.
Yeah, literally, it's like a windbreak. So you had to go to the toilet behind that, and then shower in the room, which was interesting. Luckily, I brought him some budgies out.
Or I'd have been stuck.
You would have been stuck.
There's one way to we've known each other for a few years, and we get on pretty well. We hadn't ever travelled like this on bikes before, and it was a good, if you go in and you start like that, the rest of the trip will be absolutely fine.
It was hilarious. It was so fun.
We probably didn't get enough sleep because we spent too long laughing at it and taking stupid photos in the shower.
It was so funny.
It was a great start to the trip.
Oh man. So that was our night by Lake Iseo. The next day we headed towards Lake Garda, where you had your first mechanical issue, I guess, of the trip.
I did. That day was a real mix because it started with a really nice start. We had, as we were just leaving, the owner of this place that we'd stayed in ran out to grab us.
Ukrainian man.
Ukrainian, so he didn't speak Italian, which was why I'd had issues communicating through Google Translate,
Yeah.
because I was trying to speak to him in Italian, which neither of us understood. But eventually we worked it out, and yeah, he ran outside with his wife, and they gave us a couple of apples, which is just really kind. You don't expect it, and it's really not necessary. But it's often, we've realised on this kind of adventure, the smaller the gesture, the more pure and the better it feels. Things like an apple, it's like
It was thoughtful. He went inside and he didn't have to do that.
What can I give them?
We were about to leave and he was like, wait, ran inside, got some apples, came back out, gave them to us. And it was great. It's what we needed. Yeah, exactly what we needed.
But we then rolled out, and soon I'd had some speed wobble, which we discussed last time, first or second episode, but it was getting really bad, and it was getting worse than what I'd expect speed wobble from poorly packed bags to feel like. You were riding behind me at that point and could see that my back wheel didn't look too happy, and the speed wobble in part was coming because I'd snapped a spoke. I was carrying lots of spares at this point, but I wasn't carrying the spares to mend a broken spoke, because it's not just as simple as replacing the spoke, taking the broken one out and putting a new one in, which is a process I can do, and I've done it many times before. But to be able to get the spoke in and out, you have to remove, if it's on the back wheel, the cassette, and you also have to take the brake rotor off, which it just requires a few more tools. They're quite bulky, they're quite heavy, and through the early parts of Europe, I was assuming there'd be plenty of bike shops about. The bike's still rideable at this point, carefully. So we rolled down to a bike shop. We found a fantastic bike shop.
It was. The bikes in there.
It was beautiful, wasn't it?
There was specialised tarmacs everywhere, but all custom painted. Yeah. And they were they were stunning. They were incredible. We were very envious.
And they were really nice blokes as well.
Really nice.
We rocked up, hadn't phoned ahead or booked anything, and just explained what the problem was, showed them it, and talked through the trip that I'm trying to do. And they said, it might take an hour or so just to finish something off before we get onto it, but we'll sort it out for you. And
they did it straight away
They did it pretty much straight away. We were there less than an hour.
Yeah.
Really, really nice guys, and they sent us on our way.
I mean, we rocked up not overly early to the place either, so
it was late afternoon.
Yeah, it was great. But so we got into Lake Garda, which is stunning. We then later stopped around by the lake and had some ice cream and just took it in for a while, which was incredible.
A bit more messing around. You took some really cool photos at that point. And then a bit further along, ice creams. Some more photography. Really cool place. Another place I hadn't been to before. Had you been to Garda before?
I went to Garda. My sister did an internship there for a year, so I've been a few times with my mum. And it's something I think in the future we chatted about this. We definitely like to do. The north part of Lake Garda is where it becomes a lot more mountainous and is stunning. Some insane cycling.
The southern edge. It was wonderful. It's a real challenge on a trip like this. You go through so many incredible places. You can't see everything in one trip. You can't. If you tried to see absolutely everything, you'd barely scratch the surface anyway, and it would take decades. You have to pick your routes and go with it, and then in the future, hopefully, there'll be many more opportunities to go and explore further. 100%. So we carried on through, and then headed. Gems. And often it's the places that aren't on the map as a destination that are for me anyway, the highlights of the trip.
By far. So we went through Garda. We actually changed our route. So we initially were going to do the Veneto Divide Trail, it's called. But we decided it was a bit extreme for the weighted bikes we had. You kind of needed mountain bikes. You could do it on gravel bikes if we were lighter.
If we really wanted to suffer, we could have probably made it work. Lots of carrying bikes, maybe damaging bikes, which obviously you want to avoid, especially as the fresh feeling of having just repaired the damage to my bike. But crucially, having just come through the Alps, realised that pretty much the route in its entirety was going to be above the snow line, which is bad enough on the roads because there's some ice around, but when you're off-road, you can't see the tracks you're supposed to be on because they aren't cleared. So it was there were many reasons stopped us doing it, so we took an alternative. So we took the Veneto gravel route, which luckily the bike shop I arrived to in Italy put my bike together. It was the Trek shop in where did I fly into? In Verona. They stored my bike box, and this lovely woman in there was like, no, don't do the Veneto Divide, do the Veneto gravel
routes, which we found online. It looked perfect. Went to the Dolomites like we wanted to.
It basically ran parallel to the route we were hoping to take, but a little lower down in the valley.
Yeah, which is perfect. So yeah, that night we climbed a little bit, went through some beautiful, I'm not sure if they were like vineyards, etc. They were stunning though. Ended up at our first wild camp spot of Italy.
Yes, this was a real highlight for me because this was, I'm a massive fan of the bivy bag. Bivy bag, if you haven't used one, if you're not familiar, it's a bit like a waterproof jacket for a sleeping bag. So you get in your sleeping bag and then you get in this layer over the top. It's like a dry bag with a hood. Keeps rain off if it rains, but it also just stops your sleeping bag getting damp if the dew settles in the night. Gives you a little bit more warmth as well. I've used one many times and I absolutely love it. I think it's a fantastic piece of kit. Joel had never used one, but
brought one with me on Duncan's recommendation.
You bit the bullet and you purchased your best purchase.
Best purchase so far.
And brought it out. So we were riding along and we went through a section of farmland, loads of fields. It was just grass in there, I think. At the time. Long grass, golden sunset, and we got to a sort of a section with some hedges. We could kind of hide out of sight a bit, and thought this is perfect. So we stopped off and started cooking up some food. Yeah. That was your first experience of me cooking you some camp food.
I'm going to describe it very quickly.
Yeah, you could.
Pot noodle with some boiled veg. We then put a whole tin of, I think we had sardines that night.
Yeah.
Mix it all up, and do you know what? It was not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
This is because it wasn't even a pot noodle, it was a little special.
It's even better. Special.
And I packed as many in as I possibly could. 30p noodles, they're the perfect base for a meal. Lots of carbs, great food.
It was brilliant.
We did have a bit of a sticky one that evening where we were just getting ready to start getting our sleep kit out as we were eating our noodles. And a group of kids' mountain bike club roared past, just on a track next to us, not quite the one that we were sleeping on.
But all stared at us being like, what are they doing? Luckily, all passed through without really paying much attention to us, which is good.
It was fine, but it was a good night's sleep. I mean, I slept like a log. It was all right.
I had a pretty awful night's sleep.
Yeah, but that's fine.
As expected, first night in a bivvy. I think I've done a little bit more since on these trips. And it hasn't changed. I still sleep awfully, so good luck. It is brilliant.
The best thing was we woke up the following morning and our sleeping bags, our bivvy bags, our bikes, our bags, our kit, helmets, absolutely everything we had was just covered in slugs. And they were small, about an inch long maybe, small little slugs, but absolutely everywhere. You know, like tens of slugs on your wheel, and you try and pick them off your tyre before you start riding. Trails from the slugs, leaving slugs.
I'm certain I found slugs for the next few hours on that ride, on that day.
They were sticking to our bikes.
Yeah, they just appeared.
And we couldn't get them off.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
It was brilliant.
But started riding, carried on along, it was more gravel from there on the same route. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful place to ride a bike.
It was just insane. What took me by surprise, having not really done a lot of cycling in Europe, was just the amount of how easy it was. There was water fountains everywhere to top up your water bottles. Yeah. The roads are pretty quiet, there's trails everywhere, there's signs to go through pretty common routes if that's what you wanted to go and do. It was just stunning, and it makes, for me, what was bikepacking at the time was pretty new. It's simple. So I think for everyone, it's a very great place to start. We're going to wrap this episode up for now.
Sure.
This part one of Italy. We'll go into a second part before we move into the next. So the plan is from here, part 2 of Italy, and then we'll build through the rest of Europe and go from there. On to the next episode.